So today we'll be talking about the CNS infections with meningitis as a primary point of discussion, but we'll be talking overall in terms of CNS infection. In that, encephalitis also is going to be quite important. So first of all, you need to know what do you mean by the term meningitis. Meningitis is nothing but the inflammation of the meninges and the subarachnoid space. So this is a simple definition. And most of the time, meningitis can be due to non-infectious causes also. It can be non-infective. So we have a lot of types of connective tissue disorders causing meningitis also. So that is going to come under non-infective causes. But most of the time, it's going to be secondary due to some infection, like either a bacteria, virus, fungus, or going to be a TB. So, but remember, it can be non-infective at times. This is quite important when it comes to rheumatological disorders. A lot of them can cause aseptic meningitis. And what is the clinical triad of meningism? So when you're going to really suspect that the patient is having meningitis, headache, photophobia, and or phonophobia, and neck stiffness. Some people use vomiting also, but nevertheless. So whenever you have headache, photophobia, and neck stiffness, this is going to be called as meningism. So if they ask you the clinical triad of meningitis, so clinical triad of meningitis, in that case, it's going to be fever, headache, and neck stiffness. So if you have these three, this will come under the clinical triad of meningitis. This is how actually we suspect meningeal infection or meningeal inflammation in practice. But meningism is different. Meningism is a combination of headache, photophobia, and neck stiffness. And this can occur in conditions that are non-infective also. Like for example, subarachnoid hemorrhage also can produce the same triad. So anything that irritates the meninges is going to result in something called meningism. So you have to be clear about that. And how can you classify meningitis? Meningitis can be classified as acute, subacute, or chronic. Acute means less than 1 week. Subacute means 1 to 4 weeks. And anything more than 4 weeks or more than 1 month, we're going to call it as chronic meningitis. So we'll be discussing all of them, acute, subacute, as well as chronic meningitis subsequently. So by etiological agent, it can be a bacterial meningitis, or it could be a viral meningitis, or a tuberculous, fungal, or non-infective causes also that we have discussed. So these are the CSF findings. These are something that you would have studied in your undergraduation itself. So generally, what is the normal opening pressure? It's around 12 to 20 centimeters of water. That's very important. Some textbooks tell 5 to 20 centimeters of water is fine. Some textbooks tell 10 to 20. So whatever it is fine. Up to 20 centimeters of water is perfectly fine. If you want to convert it to millimeters of mercury, millimeters of water, then it must be somewhere around 50 to 200 millimeters of water. 50 to 180 or 50 to 200 millimeters of water if you want to know in millimeters of water. So CSF is supposed to be clear because 99% of CSF is water only. The number of WBCs must be less than 5 and all of them must be lymphocytes. All of them must be lymphocytes. There should not be any neutrophils or macrophages. And predominant cells, as I said, it must be lymphocytes only. Protein approximately 0.4 grams per deciliter or grams per liter, or you can say 40 milligrams per deciliter. 40 milligrams per deciliter. And generally, when it comes to glucose, you have to always compare the CSF to plasma glucose. That's very important. You all know that because in a patient who's a diabetic, CSF glucose also can be fairly higher. So if you want to say what is the normal glucose, it's going to be 2/3 of the serum glucose. So if the serum glucose is 100, then CSF glucose is expected to be around 65 or 60 to 70, not more than that or not less than that. When it comes to protein, if you want to know the number, it's 15 to 45 milligrams per deciliter. I told you it's around 40 milligrams per deciliter, but 15 to 45 is considered to be normal when it comes to protein. So what are the features of bacterial meningitis? See, usually opening pressure and probably the protein is not going to give you much idea. Because if you look at opening pressure, in all these conditions, opening pressure is going to be higher. So that's not going to give you a good information. Okay. So when it comes to protein, again, all of them are going to have high protein. Even though viral meningitis will have mild increase in protein and mild increase in pressure, but technically speaking, all of them are going to have high levels of protein and high opening pressure. So that's why I'm saying that these are not going to give you that much of diagnostic information in practice. So what is going to give you the diagnostic information is going to be the cell type. So whether it's going to be neutrophils or lymphocytes, that's what is very important because the moment you see neutrophils, especially if the number of neutrophils are more than 100, you're going to say it is an acute bacterial meningitis for sure. Or it can be predominantly lymphocytes. If it's lymphocytes, then the differential diagnosis is wild. It can be viral, tuberculous, fungal, or even non-infectious causes. All of them are going to have more lymphocytes only. But the most important thing, first thing that you have to see is whether it is neutrophilic or lymphocytic CSF. Then comes your glucose. Glucose becomes very, very important. So whenever glucose is normal, so that is a big clue towards viral meningitis, or we can call it as aseptic meningitis. In all other conditions, glucose levels are going to be low only. But in viral meningitis, it's going to be normal because virus doesn't have the machinery to metabolize glucose. That's why that point is very important. And number of cells is not that important. Generally, as I said, in acute bacterial meningitis, more than 100 neutrophils will be there. In viral meningitis, somewhere around 5 to 100 lymphocytes will be there. In tuberculous meningitis and in fungal meningitis, it can be from 5 to 500 lymphocytes. So the range is wider, so the number is not specific as such. In bacterial meningitis, you are going to have a turbid CSF. Whenever they mention a turbid yellowish CSF, it's full of pus, it indicates a bacterial meningitis. But in viral meningitis, it's going to be clear. That's why it's called aseptic meningitis at times. Whereas in tuberculous meningitis and fungal meningitis, it's variable. It can be clear or it can be cloudy sometimes, but it won't be turbid. Turbid means it's always bacterial meningitis only. So these are the various CSF characters. As I said, your opening pressure protein is not of that value when it comes to diagnostic standpoint. Your cells and glucose are going to be the most important. And to some extent, your appearance and your cell count also may be quite important. But as I said, your type of cell and glucose is going to be the most important parameter that's going to help you from diagnostic standpoint.